Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Phoebe Kirkup. I work in the Higher Education section of UNESCO, and I have the pleasure of starting our session off today. So without further ado, I would first like to introduce you all to the Assistant Director General for Education at UNESCO, Ms. Stefania Giannini.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you took a rest after a very, very intensive, energetic first day of this World Higher Education Conference 2022, as I did. And it's a great pleasure for me to open this very important session this morning, which is about celebrating the official launch of an important report, the report entitled Knowledge-Driven Actions, Transforming Higher Education for Global Sustainability. It's about transformation, it's about being results-oriented, it's about the role of universities to contribute in a very holistic approach, as in many sessions yesterday we heard, is the right approach to take to 2030 agenda to become the reality and not simply, and crucially, a great, amazing dream. Well, just a bit of background notes to remind all of us what it's about, this initiative. 2 years ago, an expert group on universities and the 2030 Agenda was launched by UNESCO in collaboration with the University of Bergen. As many of you, I'm sure, know, Bergen is one of the more engaged frontline university about SDGs and the engagement of and the contribution that research, science, and higher education can bring to 2030 agenda. This group was tasked with a very specific mission, reflecting on the necessary knowledge and transformations required for higher education institutions to contribute to the achievement of the SDGs. And it's a pleasure now to see the very vibrant, vigorous work of this group come to fruition. And I wish to warmly congratulate all the members of the group. We are pleased to have several of the authors with us today. Thanks for coming and being with us in Barcelona. And this report became available in February online as a part of the SDG Bergen conference, which is a very already popular reference conference at global level on connecting universities with the global goals. Well, at the opening ceremony yesterday, I'm sure you carefully listened to, appreciated, as I did, the keynote speech from Professor Sylvia Schmelkes, co-chair of the group, who made a clear call for urgent transformative action within higher education institutions as an ethical imperative. I think this is an important notion. It's an important concept that we have to, to start to repeat. As Leitens said, repetita juvent. It's important to remind all colleagues globally that it's not simply to boost science and research in these troubled times and to contribute to the UN action plan for a better, more sustainable, peaceful world, but it's very much about taking a collective responsibility to make unethical work together. Well, the SDGs are indeed a unifying challenge for universities and students worldwide. The relevance of higher education hangs on the capacity of institutions to prioritize sustainable development in an approach that is at the same time ethical, human rights-based, and inclusive. One of the key purposes of this report is to provoke, invigorate, strengthen discussions among the higher education community on the importance and the relevance of thinking about how they concretely can contribute to this mission. And this calls for, as Professor Schmelke said clearly, for a mind shift of paradigm, I would say, within higher education and universities themselves. So we can transform if we are able to transform. And the three more core themes of the report go really, in my opinion, to the real heart of these transformations needed. Let me recall briefly, they are to go beyond disciplinary boundaries, to promote a truly global knowledge base for the SDG, and crucially to expand partnerships with civil society actors, which is a bit open windows and doors of our institutions. In short, this is about democratizing access to learning and knowledge. UNESCO's World Higher Education Conference this year aims to promote and facilitates this global conversation on future directions for learning, implying a dynamic and collective exchange on these crucial topics. I'm really sure and confident that today's event can really nourish this key conversation, this dialogue that we must have on transformation. And once again, true, genuine transformation becomes possible when and only when we act all together. And I really look forward to hear this panel to give us some of the keys for change. Thank you very much. Enjoy the panel.
Thank you very much, Ms. Giannini. Next up, I have the pleasure of welcoming Ms. Margaret Hagen, the rector of the University of Bergen, which is our amazingly strong partner in this initiative of this expert group. So welcome, Rector.
Dear all, free and independent universities are our most important guarantors for academic freedom. With academic freedom, scholars can research freely and independently. When they do this, they build pools of knowledge that society can draw from in times of need. We saw this recently during the pandemic, where we could draw from decades of basic research to develop a vaccine in record speed. And we have seen this also historically at the University of Bergen, where a small community of scholars interested in ocean currents almost 100 years ago turned now into the largest climate science center in the Nordic region. And we see this when war breaks out, and experts from all fields do their best to help people who lose all they have. Free, independent, and curiosity-driven research makes society resilient. It makes society ready for new challenges. And this is vital to remember when we strive to meet the 2030 agenda. Today, we are officially and proudly launching the report Knowledge-Driven Actions, Transforming Higher Education for Global Sustainability. This report is an example of just this, researchers drawing from their knowledge to address an important issue. The University of Bergen has served as a co-secretariat together with the UNESCO section for higher education. And on behalf of the University of Bergen, I would like to thank UNESCO so much for responding to our initiative in this work. And I would like to send my sincerest gratitude to both the expert group and our colleagues at UNESCO for a productive and rewarding collaboration. We also want to thank the International Association for Universities and the International Science Council for being supporting partners in this project. This project is not a conclusion, but it is a beginning of an important discussion. And I'm very, very excited to follow this discussion in the coming period and years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rector Hagen. And really, I can say that this entire initiative would not have been possible without the support of your university, so thank you very much. Finally, our last introductory speaker I have the pleasure of introducing is State Secretary Oddmund Løgensgaard-Huel, who is from the Norwegian Ministry of Education and Research in Norway.
Dear Excellencies and distinguished colleagues, it's a great pleasure to be here this morning for the launch of this important expert report placing the spotlight on the role of higher education institutions in reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. We must make sure to remind society and ourselves of the critical role that higher education institutions play as institutions of knowledge and critical thinking. This expert report is a groundbreaking contribution to ongoing discussions within the higher education community. And I am positive that it will stimulate debate on how universities can contribute towards a more just and sustainable world. We are proud that Norway took a leading role in the founding of the expert group, and we would like to express our utmost gratitude to the University of Bergen and UNESCO for following up this initiative in such admirable fashion. UNESCO holds a critical role as global coordinators of Sustainable Development Goal 4, and we are grateful to see your strong support for this ambitious initiative within higher education. The EGU 2030 report comes at a time where we are experiencing engaged discussions at Norwegian higher education institutions about the responsibility of universities for building a better world. We must continue to support higher education institutions in developing research and innovation that contribute to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Through developing this timely and insightful report, the expert group has provided a contribution that deserves our full praise and support. I look forward to listening in on the views of this highly competent panel. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, State Secretary. Now, before we get over to our interesting panel discussion, I have the pleasure of introducing the two co-chairs of this expert group, Ms. Sylvia Schmelkes and Dag Olav Hessen. They'll give a very brief summary of the report before we head over to our discussions.
Yeah, let me also start by expressing my gratitude to UNESCO, University of Bergen. As many of you have heard, they have been instrumental in running this process through. But I also like to express my gratitude to co-chair Sylvia and the expert group. And last, but definitely not the least, the Secretariat from Bergen and UNESCO. So this is clearly not the first report on this issue. It's neither the last, hopefully, but still we think that this report really brings something new to the table. We see this as a bold and visionary report, and it needs to be bold because these are really critical issues. The world is really facing unprecedented challenges, and universities and higher education institutions have a specific responsibility to deal with this. We should not only be part of this, but we should take a leading role. Universities have led to illumination and humanization of societies for 1,000 years, so we should take the same role also for the future in this context. Personally, I'm leading a center for climate change and nature loss, and we also discuss how this interact with health issues. I mean, climate is today the largest threat to global health. So these are literally burning issues, and time is short, so university has to take a leading role here. And it's important to state that the report does not only discuss the practices within universities, although that's also important as role models, but also the role that universities and higher education institutions should take for the society at large, which is, I would say, equally, if not more important. And we do this by, the report starts with, well, setting the stage, so to speak. What's the issues, what's up on the agenda for universities in this context. And then we specifically link this to three overarching topics that we'll present more in detail soon. The first is beyond disciplinarity, these things that we have been discussing for 20, 30 years, but now really need to do something about it to transverse the silos. It's not running against basic research by no means, but we need to have these cross-cutting issues and sections also to deal with this complex issue. Then there is the different ways of knowing. We need to democratize science, knowledge, and also realize that there are different ways of knowing that we need to take into the table. And finally, as we also heard, the third main point is higher education partnerships at a large scale, both north-south, but also interaction with society at large, which is clearly also a critical issue where universities need to take a lead role. So the first topic, before Sylvia moves on with the next, is this beyond disciplinarity, and this should be addressed at different levels. Of course, when we deal with complex issues like the 17 goals definitely are, and how they interact, of course, we cannot do this in our own silos. This really needs cross-cutting issues to address this. And then we need also to address this both in education and research and also outreach. So at all levels, this cross-disciplinarity or even radical transdisciplinarity has to be taken more seriously than we have done before. And I think nobody are really against this, but we need the mechanisms to make this work. So this is really one of the topics that we discuss in detail, and through all these topics we also provide a number of examples on how this can be done, because there are institutions that already have done this with great success, I would say, that we all could learn from. So, Sylvia.
Thank you very much. Well, I just also want to thank the University of Bergen and UNESCO, and of course, all of the authors and the Secretariat for the possibility of writing this report, which also I think is a report that will lead to very important changes in the world of higher education. But the second theme is on ways of knowing, and this relates to engaging with other ways of knowing. The report makes a strong case for the need for higher education institutions in general to open up to multiple and plural views of the world, as well as to very diverse ways of knowing that can add value to strict science-based knowledge, and with potential for, among other things, explaining and protecting the environment. Higher education institutions should be privileged spaces for epistemological dialogues among diverse views of the world, and should show openness to diverse ways of knowing. Epistemological issues also need revising. Knowledge produced in a diverse range of settings can provide important insights for solving environmental, health, production, and social problems locally. And some of this knowledge has been successfully transferred to other contexts and has been found to have more universal uses. This is why traditional downplaying, ignoring, and discrimination against more diverse ways of knowing should be openly combated, and conversely, higher education institutions should set an example of openness to other non-hegemonic modes of knowledge and production. They should also foster epistemological dialogue as a means towards renewing our questions and finding new ways for seeking answers. Diverse cultures possess different stores of knowledge, perspectives on the world, and languages through which to express that understanding. Different worldviews can be seen in the relationship between humans and nature, whether this is one of separation or of unity, and whether it aims at control or at harmony, and between human beings and their conceptions of community, power, distribution of resources, and justice. Greater engagement and dialogue with diverse communities will strengthen higher education's capacity to build global knowledge for sustainability. So this section, did we change that? Yes. Takes as its starting point that mainstream academic knowledge has many merits, but should not assert an exclusive claim or relegate other ways of knowledge to irrelevance or to the merely exotic. Instead, we need to move towards what Santos calls an ecology of knowledge, making room for other ways of knowing, learning, and sharing knowledge in higher education institutions. In doing so, we adhere to the idea of embracing a pluriverse. The focus may, for instance, be alternatively placed more on knowing as a verb than knowledge as a noun. The main distinguishing features are ever-moving relationships rather than fixed categories. This calls for an intercultural approach to teaching and to research and makes way for the co-production of knowledge. Realizing the full potential of human understandings is less about different ways of knowing and more about knowing through difference. So that is a very brief summary of the second section, or the second theme of this report. The third theme has to do with partnerships in higher education. The theme is about the impact of higher education institutions in society. There is a need for strengthening partnerships with all sectors of society, including particularly the most marginalized, those who suffer the consequences of environmental and social problems, with whom they should work in dialogue to intervene in mitigating or solving local problems. Their role in influencing policymaking is key. Partnerships with governments, the private sector, civil society organizations, grassroots organizations, and with local communities should be multiplied and strengthened. Networks of local and national higher education institutions, as well as internationally, can benefit from expanding technological resources, but have to be based on horizontal and respectful relationships. Higher education institutions have a very important responsibility in raising understanding and awareness in society at large about environment and the SDGs, and the way these involve the behavior of different actors in society. In short, this section is a call for a much stronger presence of higher education institutions with all sectors of society and for a greater impact on social and environmental transformations. And I pass the last words to Dag. Thank you.
So how to make all this happen? Of course, that's easier to say and ask than to do. Of course, one thing that this report acknowledges through all the sections is the vast multitude and different ways that universities and higher educations come in. So it's not such that one size fits all. Different institutions need, of course, to adopt these recommendations and goals to suit their specific purpose. But there are some overarching goals, and I think much of this summarizes, to borrow Sylvia's words, it's an ethical imperative. Again, this humanity is facing unprecedented challenges. I think this is indisputable in the context of the 17 SDGs. And really, to be a relevant part of society, universities has to take a leading role here. So there are a number of specific recommendations in this report. Again, I repeat also that we provide a number of good examples on how this can be done. But I think the overarching point is that this is a kind of ethical imperative for university and higher education. It doesn't mean that all courses or all education or all research has to have a sustainability tag on it, but by and large, sustainability should transverse everything we do. So that was about the explicit values and the first 2-3 points, I would say. Of course, again, unnecessary to repeat this very important aspect of cross-cutting insights from different disciplines to transverse the silos. And again, there are a number of advices how this can be done, but basically it boils down to the fact that different institutions have to find their own way under these general recommendations and more specific goals. I think also it's important to realize that young people come to universities today with a wish to save the world, so to speak, and we owe them to show them respect in this wish, and in that way also adhere to these recommendations for how to transform higher education and universities to fulfill these demands. So, yeah, you need, of course, to read the full report. It's accessible. You can download it and also read through all the recommendations and examples. So with that, I think we end our brief presentation of the report. And again, thanks to all that have contributed.
Thank you so much, Zag and Sylvia, and I know I speak on behalf of the entire group when I say that the process of creating this report would really not have been possible without your leadership, so thank you both. Now, I promise I won't take much more of your time before I hand things over to the moderator, but before I do, I just wanted to put a few quotes up on the screen. So one of the really important things to this expert group was to make sure that this report was about creating dialogue and hearing opinions and perspectives from everyone. So in the process leading up to today's official launch event of this report in Barcelona, we reached out to some people to gather their opinions and reactions to the report. So I'm not going to read through them, but I will just put a few of them up on the screen. This one's quite interesting, talking about the different goals in relations to education, research, and community engagement from David Gibson, who is the UNESCO Chair on Data Science in Higher Education Learning and Teaching from Curtin University. And here we have a quote from Dina Buchbinder, who's the founder and president of Education for Sharing. And I really think she summarized it well of this key question that we're asking really when we read the report, which is who will be the ones that are deciding these goals. And that second quote there is a prominent matter for how we need to think about moving forward, right? Thinking about students as catalyzers for these transformations that are very much needed. Finally, we have this quote from Charles Hopkins from York University, who is also a UNESCO chair in reorienting education towards sustainability. And I will just leave you to read that quote, and I hope that these can maybe start to generate some inspiration for the very interesting discussions that are about to come. And perhaps now I will leave things over to our wonderful moderator, Melody Brown-Berkens from Dartmouth, who is also one of the expert members of this group. And she has kindly offered to moderate today's session. So without further ado, I will leave things to you, Melody.
Thank you so much, Phoebe. And thank you to Dag Hessen and Sylvia Schmelkes again. Thank you so much. for the summary, and I also want to thank UNESCO, the Ministry of Norway, the University of Bergen, the organizers of this wonderful conference, and the city of Barcelona for such an excellent venue and the energy I have seen here. So as mentioned, I'm Melody Brown-Berkens. I am from Dartmouth in the United States, where I direct our Institute of Arctic Studies and also am a senior associate director of our John Sloan Dickey Center for International Understanding. It's my very great honor to welcome 5 panelists to talk about this report today, or talk about ideas, maybe next steps from the report. They are all leaders in global higher education and strategy, and they include Deputy Vice Chancellor, starting over there, Deputy Vice Chancellor Jose Frans from South Africa. She's the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research and Innovation of the University of the Western Cape. We also have President Francisco Marmolejo from Qatar, President of Higher Education of the Qatar Foundation. Dr. Bud E. Hall from Canada, Associate Fellow and Project Lead, the Center for Global Studies at the University of Victoria, and also the UNESCO Chair in Community-Based Research and Social Responsibility in Higher Education. Next to him, we have Minister Joan Subirats from Spain, Minister of the Universities of the Government. Thank you for being here, all of you. And finally, Ms. Sofia Bermudez from Argentina, an international relations student and a member of the SDG4 Youth Network. She also works for the Argentine Youth Organization for the United Nations. So this is an incredible panel that we have here to talk about this work. So first, I'm going to take the opportunity to ask each panelist a little bit, just to give a brief summary of what, after reading the report, what they thought. And I will start with, if it's okay, I will start with you, Jose.
Thank you for this opportunity to be here this morning. For me, the report really speaks to what we are doing in South Africa. It is a document that starts to validate what we are doing in higher education. And I really think that it's something that we can connect with in terms of what we are doing. From the University of the Western Cape, when I saw knowledge-driven action to transform, it was for me something that resonated with us, because initially our slogan at the University of the Western Cape was from hope to action. And then our leadership decided to add through knowledge. And for me, this is the change the leadership made at UWC that assists us in driving the agenda that we are wanting to drive. And knowledge is the vehicle that is going to take us forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I will just go next to President Francisco.
Well, I think something similar. What I like of the report is that it brings back to the table the key point about the moral imperative of higher education institutions to be back at the center of the stage, addressing the critical topics that society has and will have in the future. I think we tend to forget the fact that higher education should be, I might say, an exemplary, a corporate citizen of our communities. And that higher education, of course, should be, in a way, a mirror of society. And so busy all of us are with the need for our higher education institutions to survive in a challenging environment, in an environment in which there are many competing needs in our societies. We tend to forget that central role of our higher education institutions. So the report is bringing back to the table that need to both, of course, prepare people for the future, but at the same time being the best citizens of our communities in tackling the big challenges that humankind is going to be facing.
Thank you. And Bud.
Like my two previous colleagues, I'm thrilled with this report. This is my third higher education, UNESCO Higher Education Conference, was at 97, 2009. And this report is the best report on higher education that has ever come out of UNESCO, and I think it's going to reverberate around the higher education world, and then I think it's going to become, one of the classic UNESCO, like Learning to Be was, 30 years ago. I think this report is going to be referred to time and time again, and I think that in our short summary, two of the areas that are particularly forward-looking are the idea of including multiple epistemologies. That's a huge challenge. 500 years we've been working with a narrow Eurocentric base of knowledge. Now they're calling for, opening up that, and I think that's terrific. And I also really like the section on more attention on partnerships and not just, on these. So I'm really delighted, with this report.
Thank you so much. Minister Subrats.
Well, I'd like to say that, as my colleague said here in this panel, this report, which I read a few days ago, is of a quality which I really believe is significant for many reasons. Because it emphasizes interdisciplinarity. It's not new, but I think it's important to emphasize that in this context. And I'd also highlight, as my colleague said, the importance lent to the different visions of knowledge. Remember, Paulo Freire said the idea of bringing together an idea of knowledge which forces us to think in terms of universities. The idea of transfer, exchange, but swapping this for a more modest concept of transformation. So I would highlight this pluralist vision of knowledge and the need to recognize different forms of knowledge, which are very important in these transformation processes.
Gracias. Thank you. And finally, Ms. Bermudez Sofia.
Thank you, Melody. It's an honor for me to be here and to share this space with such distinguished panelists. First of all, I would like to remark the excellent contribution this report is in order to rethinking and transforming higher education, especially with the challenges in these post-pandemic times we have. I really want to highlight the importance that the report places on students' preparation for the future. And as many of the people that were speaking in the introduction, also universities have this unique responsibility and also opportunity to shape young minds, and also to understand how that opportunity and how that responsibility is not only to transfer us, how he just mentioned, knowledge, but also for us to understand how we can use this knowledge and how we can understand our privilege of going to university, of accessing higher education, and use this knowledge to put it at the service of society to respond to the challenges we face in these times and to address the most critical issues that the future presents to us.
Gracias, thank you. I am so excited. I didn't know what they might say, and I was, thank you all. I'm overwhelmed. It's a wonderful, wonderful response. I really didn't know. Thank you for your opening statements. And next, I'm going to walk us through a few questions and some interaction. But the first will just be to start the dialogue, similar to what we just did. I'll ask you one question. And then for the audience, just so you know, in the next question, I'll also ask you for a statement, but then open up a little bit for the panel to ask questions of one another. Same with the third question, if time permits. And then finally, I hope to open up to the audience for questions as well. So the first question, I will just preface a little bit by saying we all know the challenges that higher education faces. We've spoken a little bit, there are so many things, and you mentioned this, Francisco. The faculty, the administrators are constantly just trying to keep up. But how higher ed could be and should be at thinking about the future of our planet and our society. And that is what this report is and hopes to address in Dialogues for the Future and today. So instead of asking about those challenges, my first question I wanted to ask the panelists was to actually share, if you wouldn't mind, would each of you share a positive example of leadership that you've seen in your institution or organizations that does advance sustainable development? And what is it, maybe it's an example that resonates with you, where you said, oh, this is possible. So if you don't mind, I'll start with you, Sophia.
Yes. A transformative experience I had when I was studying at university that helped me to relate what I was studying with real-world problems was actually a United Nations model. There was an educational project, and this experience for me was transformative and it was a game changer, because it helped me to understand that what I was studying, it was not something isolated that I would only have to study in order to pass on my exams, but also how I can use that, and help me to also understand my responsibility in the world, in society, in my community, how I have this responsibility of put all that knowledge at the service of that. Actually, I know the importance of these kind of projects because after I have this experience, I joined a nonprofit organization where I lead educational projects. And I've done this for over 8 years. And these educational projects aim to empower young people for them to become agents of change in their communities. From my experience, what I've seen working with high school students and university students as well, is that these are important and critical experiences for young people to understand that they are part of a society, that we play a key role, and we actually understand that we are global citizens. And also not only understanding that and understanding more about the Sustainable Development Goals and how we can relate what we are studying, what we are learning with the Sustainable Development Goals and the issues we face, but also these are really important experience for us to develop critical skills we need for the future. Because from my experience of working in these projects, what I've seen and working with young people, that is one of my passions, youth empowerment, is that young people want to change the world. We have desire and the commitment to change the world. But in all the projects I've been, the main question of young people is how can I start? How can I do from my place? How can I change reality? Because it seems like a big challenge to just address for one person. So I think I brought this experience and this example to the table, to this space, to this panel, because I think higher education institutions must try to give us more opportunities like this, more initiatives, research opportunities or projects or initiatives where we can practice what we have learned and put all that knowledge, and for us to give us the chance to try and fail and to come up with different solutions. So I know what I'm studying, I know what I'm learning, but also I have this opportunity to put in practice what I'm learning and have the space to think of solutions in order to address the most critical issues of our time. And higher education has this really key space in order to, and unique opportunity to give us the tools, the knowledge and the skills for us to channel all the desire and commitment we already have to change the world.
Thank you, and you all get to follow that. So, Minister Subirats, Joan, would you like to answer that?
One of the key problems that Spain has now is a depopulation in many provinces. Half of Spain's provinces are losing their population, and cities are increasing in population. This is a global phenomenon as well. And there are some provinces, areas which are of particular concern. For example, Teruel. It has an average of 9 inhabitants per square kilometer. Spain has 92 in general, the European Union 120. So that's an extremely low population with very few opportunities for development. And from an environmental point of view, it has a huge reserve and a huge quality as an environmental area. What the Ministry for Universities has done now is to create some new elements to assist universities to set up spaces for generation of knowledge and activities linked to the local reality in Teruel. For example, a research institute on heritage and humanities, historical heritage, and a drone center, a chair for drones, because there are very large areas where you can work with technology linked to this issue. Also, we've established a rural campus program. 200 universities from other parts of Spain are able to be present in local development activities for 6 months, also involving the local population. So this is very important in terms of knowledge. And this was done not on the basis of an autonomous decision by the ministry, but through discussions with local communities, seeing what kind of elements should be developed. And then on that basis, through a joint definition of the problem, it was possible to propose an alternative where higher learning is a real resource for those communities.
Thank you. May I ask you, Bud, what inspires you?
Thanks very much, Melody. The University of Victoria is located on an island. The island is called Vancouver Island. That's not the city of Vancouver, which is on the mainland. And our island is off the west coast of Canada and is surrounded by the Pacific Ocean on one side and what we call the Salish Sea on the other. So we are, our university, and indeed all of us on our island are very taken by the notions of sustainability and climate change. We're also very taken by the need for what we call decolonization or indigenization, because of the large percentage of First Nations peoples who have been on our island for 14,000 years, and people who look like me have only been on our island for about 150 years. So one of the, I think, very encouraging developments at our university has been the creation of what's called a Climate Solutions Navigator. So what is the Climate Solutions Navigator? It's an initiative. It's a cross-campus working group where representatives from all of the disciplines, all of the faculties got together with the goal to develop a suite of ambitious short and long-term recommendations for climate solutions. We all know the climate problems, but what are the solutions? And so with a multidisciplinary approach, support from Vice President of Research and our what we call the Pacific Institute for Climate Solutions, we've developed this Climate Solutions Navigator. And I'll say a little bit more when you come back to us to ask for. You may wonder, well, what did you accomplish? And I can share that, but I'll hold you in suspense till then.
Well done. Thank you. President Francisco.
Yeah. I'm tempted to speak Spanish, if you don't mind.
No worries.
Tomando la ventaja.
I'm going to take advantage of the presence of the minister and simultaneous interpretation. I'd like to speak my mother tongue. I'd like to take a very concrete example of the Qatar Foundation, where I'm fortunate enough to work. It's a foundation which was created very much related to the main concerns that we're examining here. The slogan of the foundation is to unblocking human potential. And the instruments that the foundation considers, well, the first one is education, then research, and thirdly, involvement and service to the community. And I think this is very much related to discussions on sustainability, because our key instrument in higher education is education per se, so we can't dissociate it from the important role played by universities in research. But above all, we shouldn't forget that ultimately all of this needs to be looked at, taking into consideration the context, the community where we are. Universities, unfortunately, and given that they are tending to be more global in nature, this is a worrying trend with this race for rankings, etc. The more global they become, the local level often becomes an obstacle. In fact, it's even something which is bothersome. So, we've looked at productivity of universities. It's through research papers. So we don't reward academics in the community. We punish them. Let's look at universities where academics can't work in the community because they can't write their scientific paper, because that's how they're assessed in terms of obtaining tenure in their institution. So coming back quickly to our foundation, Qatar Foundation, what we did was to determine that sustainability was the key instrument for the foundation. So everything that we do in the foundation must be done for sustainability of the community and of the planet. And therefore, what we did was to basically identify 4 initiatives which are strategic related to this. Firstly, how do we tackle sustainability as a behavior, as a way of seeing life in education? And this involves work that we have to do in higher education, but also do coordination with the entire education system, from kindergarten to right up to lifelong learning, the rest of our lives. It's not just a matter of knowing problems related to the environment, really believing in the need that as human beings we are guilty, but also part of the solution. Secondly, what we call these are the 4 S's. So we call this the core. So the second is a coordination. The 4 C's, sorry. This is essential. We have many activities in our foundation and different universities. Often we don't know what's going on. So we need to coordinate. We need to avoid duplication or not cause duplication when it's not relevant. And we need to ensure that there is appropriate coordination of efforts in order to maximize the resources that we have and the impact that we want to have. The third C is combining. The capacity that these institutions have to ensure that their institutions, as neutral institutions, have a moral capacity to bring together players to work on different subjects. It's what we call combining. For the Qatar Foundation, we have what we call an education city where it's based. It's a city. We believe that the education city can be the best place to experiment things which can then be scaled up later. It's what we call the test bed. We take advantage of our city to see if things work or not. We experiment with different things and then we try and scale them up to the community later. And the last C, we call it contextualization, coordination, combining, and context. In the case of the Qatar Foundation, well, none of this makes any sense if we don't contextualize it in the culture, history, and values of the community where we are living and working. In our case, we look at how we can link the values of Islamic culture with sustainability. Where is that point of convergence in the cultural context of the community? But the same thing can occur in any other community in any other part of the world. So this is how we are tackling the issue of unlocking the human potential.
Muy bien.
Thank you very much. And so I will go to you, Josie.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I think from what we are saying is context is very important. And so just to give you context of where University of the Western Cape is in Cape Town, and part of our higher education history and apartheid history is that UWC is classified as a historically disadvantaged institution. And we are surrounded by two big universities who are classified as historically advantaged universities, meaning that a UWC is a university that has constrained resources. But the positive example that you are asking for is University of the Western Cape itself, and how have we transformed to become a sustainable university. And so in my opening remarks, when I said that we changed our slogan from hope to action, we included from hope to action through knowledge. And I said that this was a leadership change because we realized that as leaders, we need to give hope to our students, to our academics, to our partners, to our communities through knowledge. And key to what we needed to do was to transform the thinking of the higher education sector in terms of what the contribution is that University of the Western Cape can make. And that transformation was not only based on the human resources aspect, if you know where we come from in South Africa, and the apartheid era, and we needed to change how the face of academia looks. But we also need to talk about transformation in terms of our curriculum and our research in terms of what we were doing. And so at the time, it was really for us, as I mentioned yesterday in my talk, that addressing SDGs was never intentional. It was pure survival. We continued to operate in a VUCA environment, addressing issues of poverty where our students came from, health inequities, gender inequality, and I can mention quite a few examples. And these challenges were challenges that were faced by our staff and our students on a daily basis. And as I said, we were classified as this historically disadvantaged institution according to our apartheid history, and we needed to transform. We needed to make the change. We needed to be viewed differently, and we needed to show that we can influence society and the higher education sector. So we made the shift to use knowledge as the vehicle to drive change, and this is what we call intentional leadership. The leaders decided that we were going to use sense-making as a theme to unpack where we were going as an institution. And it was through the vision of leaders and the resilience and hard work of academics and staff and students that we were able to make the difference. It is only in our recent IOP 2021 to 2025 that SDGs actually has become intentional and not incidental. And this for us is a benchmark. This for us is demonstration of how we have progressed to where we to how we have shifted, actually. Achievements can only be context-specific, and UWC has demonstrated that in South Africa, classified as an HDI, operating with limited resources, but striving to contribute to the pillars of higher education through learning and teaching, through research, through community engagement, we have made a difference. Today, we as UWC, we're able to compare with the best in the country, I think, despite our limitations, and we can become a partner of choice. And why is this? What have we done differently? What have we done that has made us this university that people want to choose to partner with? I think we used guiding principles such as understanding our context, and sense-making was key to driving what we are doing at UWC. We also were able to identify what our strengths are and what we have to offer. And one thing that I like from this report is the conversation around interdisciplinarity and crossing of borders. UWC has been doing this for the past 20 years, maybe because we needed to, but also because we wanted to. In the health sector, we have been contributing to the inequities through interprofessional education and interprofessional practice to drive the health systems within our country. And this is what we have to offer in terms of a positive experience in driving these goals. We've also learned that
You cannot address the wicked societal problems through only focusing in silos, and that we needed different lenses to be able to address these wicked problems. And so building partnerships became very key to what we needed to do, and how we understood our context and how others understood our context was important. And so let me just give you a simple example. Just before COVID hit everybody in 2020, Cape Town was experiencing a water shortage, despite having the beautiful sea all around us, for those of you who know where Cape Town is. A phenomenon that affected everyone, despite your standing, despite your economic situation, despite your diversity, race, gender, class, it affected everyone, and we needed to find a solution that would be beneficial for the whole city. And this is where the university came into play in terms of partnering with government, partnering with society, with communities, to collectively find solutions to a challenge that we were all faced with. And so for me, it is a positive output in terms of what we as UWC have been able to offer in terms of a sustainable university. Thank you.
Thank you. So to recap, I heard practical skills of experiential education from the students calling on us for real skills. This is something that it stands out to you. I heard working with communities and bottom-up discussions, which is all very much addressed in the report as well. And really that co-production of knowledge with your communities. I heard specific, I'm gonna have you tell us in just a moment, a specific initiative, a climate solutions navigator that brought people together, short and long-term priorities, thinking about a common problem. I heard of a whole foundation being created and really focusing not only on research and education, but recognizing that that service piece, that engagement, is really what we need to instill our institutions with the community understanding and the leadership and the morality and ethics that we need. And the connections, I should say. And then finally, thank you, is the intentional leadership of wanting to transform change and having that as a part of your strategic vision can make change and instigate as well. So with those inspirational examples, I am going to ask the panelists to delve a little deeper, because we hear about these ideas, but how do we go a little deeper? You've shared an example of a positive effort in higher education or in an organization to lead towards global sustainability and advance these ideas. Was this, I want to ask each of you, was this replicable? Is it something else others can do? And if so, more specifically, was it one individual's tenacity and their leadership? Did you have to spend a lot of money? What actually can you tell others might, if they wanted to do something about what you said, can they do it? Is it feasible? And I'm going to start, but I don't know if you mind. You said you would hold us, so I'm starting with you.
Thank you, Melody. I think so the question is, often in higher education, as in other human institutions, we have innovative things that pop up and they last 2-3 years and often are dependent on the charisma or the storytelling abilities of the leaders, and then they disappear into the framework. And higher education has proved over 500 years able to absorb almost any difficult issue and domesticate it. So why should we be more hopeful around sustainability? And so I've been very interested in my own institution as to how that has happened. So the particular example which I gave, the Climate Solutions Navigator, so what has resulted from that? Well, the first thing is that it came up with 10 outcomes, 10 calls to action, and they were framed within as a response to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So everybody read about that, and then this multidisciplinary student, community, faculty, research-led came up with, and they started with what does the physical plant, the land, and the buildings, the energy, the movement of people at in what we call the University of Victoria, what needs to be changed? And so there's the buildings. there's design of the new design of new buildings all have to be, platinum. The standard of environmentally appropriate building has to be done. We have put a big emphasis on the provision. We have cafeterias, we have food, and we've put a big emphasis on local, and getting local foods, encouraging local farmers, people on the island. We are on an island. If the ferries would stop, we have 3 days, and then we run out of food. So we're trying to change that in the way that we acquire, food for to feed our own students. And thirdly, we have invested a lot on transportation. So if you are a student at the University of Victoria, you automatically get free bus pass to go anywhere you want. We've increased the fees for cars to discourage people. We have, electric bicycle charging stations. So, I just give you one. That's one of the 10. The second thing that we've done, all of this is available on a website, is that we initiated a contest, a challenge, Climate Solutions Challenge. So we offered prizes to students and faculty to come up with more ideas beyond what the committee did, and there have been some terrific ones. And the last permanent change, structural change, is that we've introduced something called Living Lands and Indigenous Climate Solutions. And so this is together with there are 13 what we call in Canada First Nations Indigenous communities surrounding the University of Victoria area. And so we have a conversation ongoing with knowledge keepers, traditional knowledge keepers, and scientists every year on specifically on sustainability and the future of life on the island together.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And to ask Minister Subriats, Joan, if you would mind, sort of what made this work, the community engagement in the rural areas?
En el ejemplo que antes he puesto de la...
The example I gave you earlier about areas of Spain that are so underpopulated, in that regard, I think there was a very major role played by the combination of the protest movement that emerged on the one hand and the lack of attention that was being paid by the administration to this phenomenon. In other words, this idea of the division between the highly populated and the very lowly or sparsely populated areas of Spain wasn't on the political agenda at all at that time, whereas there are other policies, say agricultural policy and industrial policy, that were very much on the agenda. So this popular movement emerged called Teruel también existe, translates as Teruel also exists, it's there. And this is a province with just 135,000 inhabitants and quite a few square kilometers, but it wasn't on anybody's agenda. So they said, ultimately, they set up a political party, which was the first one in the history of Spain that was making some territorial claim, a claim on behalf of its territory, but wasn't to do with any autonomous community or historical nationalities like Catalonia or the Basque Country, but rather to this province. And this is a major breakthrough because it cleaved through the traditional divides, left and right, etc. And this political grouping got themselves an MP elected at the national elections, and then out of that, other provinces joined in this movement. You got Soria existe and Cuenca existe, and they were lodging these political claims on behalf of a platform that was neither left-wing nor right-wing, but they wanted to defend their interests as underpopulated areas of Spain. So it was interesting to see how in the university's ministry we managed to make a deal with this sector. strike a pact on the basis of recognizing how important it would be for them to have a digital university. It's very significant how one can use the digital world when bringing up such alternatives, and especially to ensure that they were the protagonists. Nothing was imposed upon them from above, but they were involved in defining the agenda. That was the basis of this pact that we struck with them. I think there's a very relevant saying, society has problems, universities have departments. Society has problems, universities have departments. So my point is that if Teruel has got problems, you can't just have a dialogue with a department. No, you need to galvanize a whole series of sectors of knowledge. It's a challenge, just like, say, sustainability, that you can't respond to on the basis of one single discipline. Another important factor that was touched upon by Francisco, when it comes to the university professors and their awareness, these kinds of things are negligible. They don't exist unless there's some publication involved, unless you're getting published. So we had to seek out an incentive and ensure also that this was not of just political and social interest, but also of academic and research interest to them to scale it up in the university. And that was the main thing here in this regard in Teruel, that this could be replicated subsequently in other areas of Spain with similar difficulties. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will turn to you, Sophia. Do you have a thought of how this kind of success could be replicated, or how it should move forward?
Yes, the experience I've shared, it can be replicated. In my case, was led by teachers that want to do something innovative, to change something, to make us understand not only the knowledge, and for us not only to learn about history, politics, or world orders, but also to understand that we, as in my case, as students of international relations, have this big responsibility of working for the Sustainable Development Goals, of understanding that those problems were in the Sustainable Goals addressed, the issues were there, what we can do from our place. I think that's a really interesting question that also Joseph mentioned when she shared with us this positive example. They asked themselves what they can do from their place to create a solution. Well, I think the role teachers play is really transformative, and also working with non-governmental organizations. A lot of teachers put a lot of hours besides the hours they have working in order to create these educational projects for young people, because they understood the importance of that. And I really recognize the work and the passion of teachers in order to prepare us for the future, but also I think in order to create structural changes, we need to go beyond that. And to go beyond that, we really need for higher education institutions to revise their curriculums and to change that, not only to transfer knowledge, but to also prepare us with skills and with this practical experience in which we can be involved.
Thank you. I will go to Francisco.
Yeah. Like Bob, I am a veteran of the World Higher Education Conferences, and I think, we have heard too many times, many things that always are just good ideas, but not concrete intentions. So my observations are not necessarily based on my current experience, but of course, in the many years that I have been working in higher education. First of all, leadership is key, it's fundamental. Again, going back to the very specific case of Qatar Foundation is there because the leadership, the inspiring leadership of Sheikh Hamosa bin Nasser, which also is a special envoy of UNESCO for education and higher education. So she truly believed, when she created Qatar Foundation 25 years ago, that the only way that the society will be able to leapfrog was precisely by creating an ecosystem of disruption and innovation, right? So the current umbrella of more than 50 organizations that are part of Qatar Foundation, including the 22 schools from kindergarten to doctoral education, including the 8 higher education institutions in which I have the privilege of serving as a facilitator of collaboration, has been precisely what it is behind this concept of the need to challenge assumptions, but at the same time, to do that with adequate leadership. So key is leadership. The second one, of course, is the policy framework. We can have great leadership, we can have capacity in many ways, but if the policy framework, it is not conducive, then we have a challenge. Consequently, we need to find ways to deal with with the framework. The third one has to do with resource allocation. As the minister was making a point about it, of course, the incentives should be in place, in the right place, in order to make sure that good ideas also can flourish. Another one, of course, fundamental, is finding the champions. In our ecosystems, in our higher education institutions, that's the beauty of a university. You have literally all spectrums of ideas, and you find the ones which are skeptical of these ideas, but also you find the ones which are truly champions, who believe in the need to connect the universities much more to the realities of the community, and we need to take advantage of them in a good sense. The other one, of course, is communication, PR. Again, we can have great ideas, but if we are unable to communicate those properly, those ideas become just good intentions. The next and the last two ones, in my opinion, which are also very important, is evidence and accountability. So we need to define milestones, KPIs, goals, and we need to make people accountable for them, and we need to make people responsible for them. So those are, again, my suggestions based on the many years of dealing with this and finding sometimes a little bit with a lot of frustration that ideas just don't move into the next level. But I'm an endless optimist, and I think that even though with the big challenges that the world is experiencing today, again, universities have a crucial place to have.
Thank you so much. I'm an optimist too. And Josie.
Thank you so much. I think I'm speaking about leadership and intentional leadership, and that we're not only focusing on by chance something is happening in the institution, but that we're actually intentional about what we're doing. The one important thing for us was about collective buy-in, and that although we as leaders could have a vision, if we don't have buy-in from all stakeholders, then we're not going to achieve that vision. One thing that we're also driving is collective leadership, and leadership at all levels. Leadership doesn't only mean a position. You don't have to have a title to be able to be called a leader, but that you can actually lead where you are in the space in which you find yourself. And that is what is being encouraged in terms of the university, is around collective leadership. And so we have what we call our institutional operating plan, which is the big vision for the institution. But we have asked that faculties bring it down to faculty level and even down to department level, so that there's buy-in at the different levels to be able to guide. And so that has been one of the successes that I think is a model that can be used across the higher education sector in terms of what we're wanting to do. I had put down here identifying champions and awareness creation, but then the previous speaker took my words. I don't even look on my page. But identifying champions really does help to drive the agenda in terms of where you're wanting to go. And being important is for our leaders to be on the platforms, to create the awareness, to constantly talk and remind us where we are going in terms of what we're needing to do. One thing about creating the awareness is that you are not only seen internally, but you are also seen externally. And that was one of the successes of UWC, in the sense that government started to see the difference that was happening within the institution and started to provide additional resources to help us achieve our goal in terms of where we were going. So that is some of the things that we have been able to indicate that is successful, and that I think can be replicated as a model for other resource-constrained institutions. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And again, I heard many themes that were wonderfully repeated, and there is this, how do we find incentives to align academic output with society's problems and policies? That is really challenging, and you have to find champions who will figure it out, and you have to find administrators, and and students are pushing for this. They're saying we want these skills to align with the policies we're hearing that you're trying to achieve, and yet I'm going to use your society has problems, university has departments. That was good for me. We hear that from the students. So I hear this, it's our incentives changing. It's also learning to lead where you are, whether you're a student, and having people encourage you to do so, and finding the incentives in the institution to let people lead from where they are, whether you're a student, administrator, a faculty member, a staff person in the institution. How can you be part of moving towards a goal? And of course, we're talking about sustainable development goals. We have an outline, and we have IPCC. You look at, the Victoria took it as, okay, how do we think about IPCC? So this connection to policy and societal goals and what's happening in the university, every one of you has spoken to it in a different way, and also then the added piece of a political movement that instead of running away from, was embraced, well, or at least tried to, was worked through. That's phenomenal and wonderful. Thank you for that example. We won't have time to do a lot of back and forth. I mean, just to have the panelists do one final, answer one final question before opening up to the audience. And what that is, and I'm actually just gonna ask you, you can do two, but you can just do one piece of advice. People read this report. You've read the report. I've helped write the report. I've read it a couple times now. You're in higher ed, or you're in the Ministry of Government, or you're an NGO, what one piece of advice might you give the folks in the audience saying, I want to get this audience, I want to get my institution or my organization moving forward on this, something in this report, and what would you suggest they do as a first step or a best step? And Francis, go first.
Just briefly, I think the recommendation for the people in the higher education community is to read the report. That's the first thing. The second, to truly read it, not to go through quickly, to truly read it. I agree, as Bob was making a point about it. It's a very good report. I think it provides a very good sense of what are the next steps for us in higher education. The second thing, while people read a book, if they think that there is going to be a recipe, they are completely wrong. There are some recommendations, and those are recommendations, but those are not, recipe solutions to this. The solution at the end of the day, everybody will have it based on the context in which you are, working. I think if people, I keep saying all the time this, if people get confused at the end of the report, that is a great achievement, because what we need to do is to get confused, to be concerned, to be aware of things that we need to do, and to challenge the traditional assumptions about what is good and bad in higher education. I think it is time, and I think this crisis of COVID and all the challenges that we are facing in the world and climate change and everything else, basically is a wake-up call for us in higher education in telling us, all solutions, traditional assumptions don't work anymore. We need to reinvent, redesign higher education. The report gives a great hints about that, and we should come up with our own specific solutions that are going to be able to address our challenges in the local community, but of course in the global community.
Thank you. Sophia, what might you tell the world's higher education and organizational leaders to do first?
Well, thank you, Melody. I think we've discussed today about how to transform higher education and how we can improve the knowledge for students and the contributions that universities can do for society. But I think something key that is, first of all, is how we can include more young people and ensure they can access higher education. Because, for example, from my experience, I'm from Argentina, I'm from Latin America, and the main problem we have is inequality. So the opportunities are there, but especially, for example, during the pandemic, education became a privilege, not a right. So I will focus on that, how we can do from our place, especially on a financial level, to help these students. Because, for example, also in Argentina, as there are really few young people as in students that can access higher education that are from poor backgrounds. But also when they access higher education, they tend to have these big rates, high rates of dropout during the last years. Because there's not only, for example, it's not like the only solution is making public universities. It's also the problems they have on a socioeconomic level, to pay for transport, to pay for food, to have the responsibility or the need to go out to work and to drop out of university to help their families to eat. So I will focus on that first, because if we don't tackle this big inequality, we will never be able to really talk about a right, as education as a right.
Thank you. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Yes, just the last thing is that all the amazing best practices that were shared by the other panelists, they all have a main thing in common. That is that they find solutions by working together, by listening to other faculty members, or to listening to students. So that's the key for the solution, and I think the last thing I want to say is that it's really important to higher education institutions to revise from their place how they can include students and young people at the decision-making tables. Because this actually was mentioned during the opening ceremony. We, as young people, we have a lot to say about our education, and most of all, we are really aware that it's our future that is at stake.
Thank you very much. Minister Subrats, Joan.
Yo quisiera...
I'd like to remind you of a book concerning the commons. If we take as our starting point the fact that knowledge is a common asset, and we need to ensure that our initiatives are well rooted in the community, then knowledge as a common good shouldn't be depending upon changes in university policy, nor on students and universities having more incentives or fewer incentives, because we'd be appropriating the knowledge as something that's essential for the community at large. The speaker referred to a book by Eleanor Ostrom, The Commons. So I'm saying that we should be switching the ownership of knowledge in that way.
Thank you very much. I don't think I've gotten to you, Bud. I will go to you. Did I go to you on sort of one point that you would like to leave the audience with after they read the report, if they wanted to move it forward?
I think the recovery or revitalization of land-based or place-based knowledge, because that's the earth, and relinking our ability to create meaning around life to the earth through our place is critical. And there's many things, ways to do that, which many of which are in the report. But I think that reconnection with the knowledge, many times ancient, sometimes indigenous traditions, systems, ways of knowing, is a critical and hopeful start.
Thank you. And Josie, you have the last word.
I have the last word. The words of my late President Nelson Mandela, he says, knowledge is power. And so I want to say that, but we also need to know that we need to share that knowledge. And so engaging here with this document has been powerful, but if we don't share the document with others in our institutions, it's going to be pointless. But the one thing I want to make to leaders is I want to say that we need to, in our context, conduct the necessary research to make informed, data-driven decisions that are best suited for our particular context in terms of wanting to drive this forward. The recommendations and this document is a blueprint, but we need to make it relevant for our own context. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I would now like to thank you all. I really had a wonderful time, and now I'm really excited to hear if there are any questions from our audience. I'm not sure how I see them, but someone will help.
There is one.
I will just, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to start by thanking those who commissioned the report and those who invested time and effort. This agenda is worthy of that attention and that investment. It is very important, and as the IPCC report reminds us, it's not too late for us to bring about the necessary change. But in the spirit of academia, I'd like to pose a question to the panel about a contradiction in the report. For me, the Sustainable Development Goals, the sustainability agenda is very much about change. It's about transition. It's about taking us to an alternative future to the ones we're experiencing. And yet, the report focuses on knowledge, understanding, awareness. And we've already seen young people taking to the streets but who have high levels of understanding and awareness, who are experiencing eco-anxiety from too much knowing and little ability or capability to transition in their personal lives or professional lives to make impact towards sustainability. So my question is about the role of higher education in building capability and not just knowledge and understanding, in helping us get to the next level. And also the importance of looking at the higher education for sustainable development literature, which is absent from the report. There's 30 years of research in this agenda that seems to be having been omitted for it. I know these are not the authors of the report, so keen to hear about this action and transition component. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we're close to time, so I'm going to ask two panelists to volunteer. Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
There is another question.
Oh, is there another question? I'm trying.
No, sorry.
I wasn't sure if I'm getting the right signals, but I wanted to ask maybe Sophia, if you wouldn't mind answering the question of how can all of this knowledge coming in be applicable, practicable? What are ways that institutions can help students feel like they can use the knowledge that they're getting and actually use it to create sustainable development?
I think it was a great question. Thank you, Melody. And I think, for example, a good way to do it is to put students and young people on the spotlight. Look, okay, what solutions do you have and how we can help from the higher institutions place? For example, one of the best practices was this contest for students who came up with solutions to tackle climate change. And I think that's really important because I don't see it really often, this place from higher education to ask for students, but not only ask, but also support them with financial aid, with other resources, with networking, to help them to escalate their solutions. So I think that's a really key point in order to start to engage and to involve also young people in the creation of the solutions.
Thank you so much. I think we're at time, so I appreciate this. Again, the panel, thank you all for showing up. Thank you all for taking in knowledge, and thank you so much to the panel for your expert knowledge and sharing with us. And I look forward to seeing you all again. Have a wonderful conference. Take care.